Welcome to this week's episode of Auto Mundial, the weekly car news and reviews show, where we drive the latest crossover from Mazda, the CX-30.
And we have a new plug-in hybrid from BMW.
As well as a left-field convertible SUV from Volkswagen, the T-Roc Cabriolet.
All that is coming up. First though, with the new Seat Leon now unveiled and on its way to showrooms, the Spanish brand's performance offshoot Cupra is hurriedly preparing a race version to compete in touring car championships. What makes this Leon race car unique though is the use of 3D printing to create some of the parts. These include the door mirrors, bonnet vents, the steering wheel control module, as well as the brake and water cooling inlets. Cupra's aim is to have a big stock of spare parts in a very short space of time, so new designs can be quickly fitted and tested before the Leon starts competing later this year. A great example of this are the door mirrors, which, according to the race regulations, must be the same shape as the ones on road-going models. 3D printing has allowed Cupra to incorporate an air vent in the maximum pressure zone, helping to cool the driver. Testing of the new touring car is almost complete, with it expected to hit the track in April.
It's true the car market may be currently heaving with an abundance of SUVs, but that doesn't mean there aren't one or two that are a bit special. This is the Mazda CX-30, and it does things a little bit differently. The aim for Mazda is to plug the gap between the rather excellent but aging CX-3 and the bigger CX-5. Basically a Mazda 3-inspired crossover aimed at young families with the latest Skyactiv generation engines. It looks superb, with plenty of influence from the beautiful 3 hatchback, but it's inside the cabin where you really notice the designer's hard work. The sculpted dash adopts a minimalist approach, with a sporty 3-spoke steering wheel and some fabulous front seats. High-spec cars get two-tone leather that feels as soft as anything from BMW or Mercedes. In fact, we'd argue that the CX-30's interior is nicer than equivalent crossovers from any German manufacturer. It isn't just the design that's good, the quality is fantastic too. The infotainment works well, while there are just enough physical buttons to keep everything simple while on the move. Sharing a platform with the Mazda 3 hatchback, the CX-30 shares many of the same bits, both under the bonnet and in the cabin. There are two versions of the 2-litre petrol motor on offer, the 120 brake horsepower Skyactiv G unit and the more potent 178 brake horsepower Skyactiv X. Both have a choice of a superb 6-speed manual or smooth 6-speed automatic gearbox. A Skyactiv diesel version is also rumoured to be on its way. In both front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive versions, the CX-30 is a pleasure to drive. Of course, it doesn't feel as sharp as the 3 hatchback, but it rides very well and the Skyactiv engines are quiet and refined. Although you do need to work them quite hard to get the same performance as a more conventional petrol engine. But how does the CX-30 match up against its nearest rivals? Well, the CX-30 isn't cheap, putting it in line with some stiff European competition. The Audi Q2 is every bit as stylish as the sculpted CX-30. It's more edgy and trendy against the Mazda's more classic lines, but they're both rare examples of head-turning crossovers. Like the Mazda, the Q2 feels like it's been built to last, with famous Audi build quality shining throughout the cabin. But while it may be built just as well, it can't compete for style. The Q2's dashboard looks fussy compared with the CX-30's, especially with the optional body colour bits. There are some cheap-feeling plastics too, which seem a little too easy to find. It is spacious though, with enough room for most adults to sit comfortably in the back. At the less premium end of the spectrum, there's the Škoda Karoq. Another VW product, the Škoda is predictably well built and feels solid throughout, despite its more attainable price tag. Sadly though, it misses out hugely on style, both inside and out. The interior is plain and quite dark compared with the more airy Mazda. It's well equipped though, and much more practical thanks to its higher roofline. It has a greater range of engines too, although none of them is likely to get your heart racing. Crossovers seem to be a winning formula for many manufacturers these days, so has Mazda successfully cashed in? Definitely. It combines the three's good looks and style with a popular SUV driving position. It's not necessarily the most practical in this class, but it's definitely the best looking and our new class favourite.
"2020 marks the 20-year anniversary of two of the biggest milestones in the Mini's history. In the year 2000, the very last old Mini rolled off the Longbridge production line, marking the end of over 40 years of continuous production. The little Mini had revolutionised car design with its transverse engine layout and TARDIS-like interior, all the while retaining its cheeky sense of style and giant-slaying performance. But 2000 also marked the start of a revolution, with the biggest shake-up in the car's history. At the Paris Motor Show that year, we got our first look at a whole new Mini. It was completely different from what had gone before. It was modern, more curvy and much bigger, but it also came with new engines, all the modern conveniences you could think of, and even some airbags. It was a far cry from Isogonus's original design, but it was still unmistakably a Mini. Naturally, it blew us all away, but it wasn't without its critics, with traditional Mini fans turning up their noses at parent company BMW's efforts. They needn't have, though. When the first cars began to hit the showrooms in 2001, it was clear that the Mini name was in good hands. The Mini name was capitalised with the uppercase badging, marking it apart from what had come before. And while there was plenty of German engineering on display, it was built in a shiny new factory in Oxfordshire. There were three versions on offer: the entry-level one, a sportier Coupe, and the even sportier Cupra S, a proper hot hatch, cashing in on the old car's success on international rallies and racetracks. It used a supercharged 1.6-litre engine with 163 brake horsepower, good for 0 to 62 in around 7.5 seconds. It was a raughty little car, just as a fast Mini should be, but it wasn't just the performance that was filling the order books. All versions traded on their brilliant design, penned by the genius American designer Frank Stevenson. He arrived at the shape by transporting his mind back in time, coming up with various designs of how the Mini would have looked throughout the previous 40 years had the original looks been developed. What resulted was undeniably bigger than Isogonus's original, but still immediately recognisable. Stevenson would go on to pull off the same trick with the Fiat 500, another retro hatchback that would go on to sell in its millions. In its first full year of production, the Mini Oxford plant built 140,000 cars, with that number growing to 200,000 by 2005. It was a huge success for BMW, so more body styles began to emerge. A convertible arrived in 2004, before the original new Mini was replaced in 2006. The slightly awkward new front end was a result of pedestrian safety standards, but we soon got used to it as Mini began to further diversify the range. The Mini was now available as an estate, badged as the Clubman. Old-school Mini fans were riled that the Traveller name hadn't been used as it was in the good old days. Another sign of its Germanic influence was the so-called club door. The Clubman only had a rear passenger door on one side, and for right-hand drive markets it meant you unloaded your children straight into oncoming traffic rather than the pavement. A new diesel engine was introduced, as well as new hot hatches in the form of new Cupra S and Cupra S Works. Sales continued to surpass the brand's expectations, helping the brand to keep doing things a bit differently. The current generation Mini is perhaps the most diverse version yet. As well as the traditional hatchback and Clubman models, there's now a 5-door version too. Having experimented with all sorts of weird body styles like the two-seater Roadster and bizarre Paceman, a sort of crossover coupe, the Mini range has now been simplified. There's the hatch, the Clubman, the convertible and the Countryman. It's a far cry from an old Mini, but the popular little SUV is full of classic Mini characteristics. It has the same retro styling inside and out, and can even be had with 300 horsepower as a John Cooper works. There's an electric model due in showrooms this year too, marking the start of a new era for the historic British brand. The new Mini is a far cry from the 1959 original, but it's still different to anything else on the road, something that all Mini fans can be proud of.
After the break, a new BMW hybrid and the VW T-Roc Cabrio.
Still to come, the convertible SUV from VW. But first,
Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, or PHEVs, are an increasingly popular bridge between a conventional hybrid and an electric car. As the name suggests, they can run more or less like a traditional series hybrid, but can also drive on battery power alone. While the range might not compare to most EVs, the ability to run on fossil fuels makes them particularly appealing to those who mix commuting with long-distance driving. And the latest manufacturer to experiment with PHEV technology is BMW with this, the new X1 xDrive 25e. Catchy. Long-winded name aside, this is still an X1, the entry point into BMW SUV ownership. As such, it looks like a scaled-down X3, keeping the proper SUV proportions despite its small stature. It gets the signature massive face that's now commonplace on BMWs and some sporty styling on M Sport versions. The interior remains unchanged from regular X1s too, meaning it gets a slightly dated dashboard, but plenty of practicality, although the hybrid system does eat slightly into boot space, reducing the capacity by 55 litres from the standard X1. But it's under the bonnet where BMW has been busy. Despite being a high-riding crossover, the X1 PHEV uses a little 1.5-litre three-cylinder petrol engine. Power is sent to the front wheels only, with an electric motor providing drive to the rears. Altogether, the system puts out a respectable 217 bhp, allowing for a 0 to 62 time of just 6.9 seconds. The 10 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery can be charged from empty in just over 3 hours with a BMW wall box, while you'll be looking at around 5 hours if you use a conventional plug socket. A full charge will give you a range of up to 35 miles, not much compared to a full EV, but it should be plenty for most commutes. As a result of the small engine and the decent battery, the official MPG figure stands at 134 miles per gallon, with CO2 figures staying low at up to 48 grams per kilometre. BMW has also confirmed that a plug-in version of the X2 is on its way, using the same system as the X1, with which it shares a platform. But while the range does leave a little to be desired, PHEVs are still a great halfway house to electric car ownership.
in days gone by, most 4x4s were convertibles. Early Land Rovers, Jeeps and Land Cruisers all had fabric roofs to save money. Then, a few years ago, Land Rover gave us the Evoque Convertible, a luxurious bathtub on wheels that achieved predictably poor sales. That hasn't put off Volkswagen though, as it boldly reveals this, the T-Roc Cabriolet. No, we're not sure why this has happened either, but it is about half the price of the other convertible 4x4, the completely different Jeep Wrangler. But this new body style does further diversify the popular little T-Roc. We've already featured the superb R version, while the regular car has quickly become a common sight on the roads. And VW has a long history of hugely successful cabrios, with the Beetle, Carmen Ghia and Golf all selling well. But where those were simply soft-top versions of existing cars, Volkswagen has had to do a little bit more engineering with this T-Roc. From the front wheel arches back, every panel has grown, with the wheelbase extending by 40mm compared to the hardtop car. The rear doors have been removed, while the roof mechanism means the rear bench is narrower, making it a 4-seater rather than a 5. And without a proper roof, rigidity normally takes a significant hit in convertibles. To try and combat that, VW has strengthened this chassis with new crossbeams, while the A-pillars have also been beefed up to protect occupants in the event of a rollover. The roof is available in black fabric only, with no fancy folding metal system like you get on the old EOS. It goes up or down in 9 seconds at speeds of up to 19 miles per hour. Otherwise, it's a standard T-Roc. It gets either a 1-litre 3-cylinder engine or a more powerful 1.5 with 148 brake horsepower. The cabin remains as funky as ever, with body colour bits and nice infotainment. Maybe, just maybe, the T-Roc Cabriolet will catch on, but we can't see VW building an R version.
In Europe and Asia, when we think of a large SUV, we think of Range Rovers, Q7s and Mitsubishi Shoguns. Across the pond in the States, though, a large SUV is on another scale entirely. This is the all-new 2021 Cadillac Escalade, and it's bigger and bolder than ever. In fact, it's even bigger than the old one, thanks to some extra length in the wheelbase. See this cruising slowly through town, and it's immediately recognisable. The German manufacturers may be pioneering huge grilles at the moment, but the Escalade takes it to a whole new level. It gets all the signature Cadillac design elements, just scaled up, with long, narrow headlights and a badge the size of a child's face. Naturally, for a car of this bulk, it gets a suitably massive engine, a 6.2-litre V8 with 420 horsepower to be precise. But interestingly, this isn't the only option. For the first time in the Escalade's history, it's available with a diesel motor. While this news is unlikely to strike much good cheer among environmentalists, it is at least a bit greener than the petrol-powered alternative, offering greater fuel economy and just as much torque. This being a Caddy, though, it's more about luxury than power. So Cadillac has fitted the Escalade with its own enhanced suspension technology, including independent rear suspension, magnetic ride control, and air ride adaptive suspension. These features alter the car's height and damping rate of the shock absorbers to create a silky smooth ride. On the road, the Escalade features Super Cruise, which enables hands-free driving on more than 200,000 miles of compatible highways in the United States and Canada, the first of its kind in a large SUV. Some of the features of this tech include automated lane change, driver monitoring systems, and lane offset. But it's when you step inside the leather-lined cabin that the Escalade really starts to make sense. It's beautifully sculpted, mixing European elegance with classic American style. The biggest features are undoubtedly the stunning curved OLED displays, which are an industry first and have a higher pixel density than a 4K television. There are 3 of them in total, one either side of the driver and one behind the steering wheel. All in all, there are 38 inches of total diagonal display range in the Escalade. If 3 displays aren't enough, there are an additional 2 in the rear seats, which feature navigation, streaming and Android support to keep backseat drivers distracted. Besides the entertainment, other interior tech includes a rear camera mirror, night vision and augmented reality navigation. Cadillac has also partnered with audio specialist AKG for a bespoke sound system. It's a true luxury car then, but it isn't without competition. This is the latest Lincoln Navigator and it's gunning for the luxury SUV crown. The Lincoln shares much of its underpinnings with the Ford Expedition and wraps up the same V6 from this Ford in a much more luxurious package. The lavish Lincoln has been our favourite posh American 4x4 until recently, but can it compete against that fabulous Cadillac? Its cabin feels just as fancy as the Escalade, but somehow looks a little more modern, despite the Cadillac's fancy screens. Like its rival, it's full to the brim with leather and wood, with a light, airy-feeling cabin. The new Escalade has the Lincoln beat on space and infotainment though. Its 3 front seat displays are much more advanced, while the extra length equates to a bit more room inside. Neither of these cars though is really built for outright practicality. They're luxury cars first, load luggers second. But that sounds like a pretty great combination to us. While they may not offer the elegance of a Mercedes or class of a Range Rover, they provide a uniquely American take on the luxury SUV.
Join us again next week on Auto Mundial as we take a look at a new hybrid city car from Fiat, as well as a new 7-seater from Volkswagen.